So yeah, Abby's just done the initial introduction. So just to give a brief overview, with this topic, I know it can be quite a broad, daunting topic depending on how you look at it. So I broke it down to 3 categories, which I'll try and run through, make it as easy to understand as possible. And like Abby said, at the end of each section, so we'll have a data protection segment, data management section, and a cybersecurity. So at the end of each one, I'll do a little pause. If there's anything that I need to clarify, maybe I haven't explained it as well as I could have done, or you want a bit more examples related to a lacrosse club based scenario, I can happy to do that each one. Or alternatively, if you want to ponder on any thoughts, we can address everything at the end. So as it's there on the screen, there are 3 topics, and they're the 3 that I thought we can give a bit of insight to. The 3 maybe that people have heard of, have got bits of idea about, but we can just address in a bit more detail and try and help ourselves as a lacrosse community, as lacrosse clubs. From my point of view, I was told to big myself up is the accurate phrase of obviously my involvement in this. It's quite a niche role to have in, I think, sports in terms of data protection, especially. So I studied law at university alongside sport, and I was always quite interested in that kind of area, if you will, and I like how law is applied and understanding legislation, but the passion of sport. So went into sport as I'm in England Lacrosse, and then probably in 2017 when GDPR was first being thrown around, got drawn back into it, and obviously I've took on data protection for the organisation, and it's been really interested, and I've been very lucky to have some very specialised training in the data protection application to sport, which I know isn't readily available. A lot of the online tools that are out there, the easy to find information is a bit generically applied. So I wanted to come from an area of going, right, as sports clubs, how can we make this more relatable to you in your position, just to make it a bit more understandable for the people who don't want to sit and read 200 pages of legislation. So before I start, I'm going to say there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Every club is made up differently, whether you're a university club and you've got your institution rules, whether you're a multi-sports club or you're a one-team lacrosse club and you've got a committee who just deals with the one team. Everything will be very different, and I will try my best where I can to help you in individual scenarios. But if there's anything specific and we want to have a conversation about your specific club and what you need to do, I'm happy to do one-on-one chats at a later point. That is not an issue. So we'll start with data protection, and I've already referenced GDPR. I'm sure most people have heard that phrase knocked about. So that's the General Data Protection Regulation, and that's an EU piece of legislation that came around. It was discussed in 2017, it became implemented in May 2018. And alongside that, you've got the Data Protection Act, which is the UK piece of legislation, which came on to support it and kind of marry the 2 pieces together about how the EU legislation fit into the UK and different things that mirror with each other. So, clear statement here. All businesses, organisations, clubs, regardless of size, are subject to the legislation if they collect or process any personal data. That is someone's name, someone's phone number, a picture of someone, someone's clothing size. Any piece of information that makes someone identifiable is personal data, and therefore you've got to make sure you do certain things to satisfy the legislation. The same way that we have financial legislation, if you know you've got to keep your audit of your books, the exact same concept. No matter how big you are, you have certain obligations that you need to fulfill. And the way I'm going to look at this, and hopefully this will really set into people who maybe have just gone, oh, we collect data, we just keep it somewhere. Put yourself in the position. If it's your data, what would you expect to happen to it? You'd want them safeguards in place to know that your data is being saved, it's being used how you think it should be used or how you was told it was being used. What would you expect from it? And that should hopefully, if you're on the journey and you're still going through things of getting used to these practices of what you can and cannot do, that should be your utmost impression of going, would I be comfortable with that? So, the legislation itself. How this legislation was built is effectively on 6 principles embedded through the entire thing. These 6 principles are at the heart of it, going, what is this legislation for? What's it doing? Why have we introduced this new piece of legislation? So the principles within it, I'm going to explain, try and put scenarios which are relatable to you guys in there, so hopefully it makes it a bit easier to understand. Lawfulness, fairness and transparency. So personal data must be processed lawfully, fairly and transparently. There are several ways we can collect data in this lawful term. If I said the word consent, I'm pretty sure most people would have heard of that and understand that phrase. If you sign on to something online, you tick a box to say you've consented. That is one of the 6 ways you can do that, which is fine. If you're a club, you go, yeah, parent, you've ticked this bottom of the form. Yeah, you're signing on as our member. I've ticked a form that says I give Whitworth Lacrosse Club, I'm just going to use my little village as my example for most things, permission to do this with my data, tick box. There are other ones, and as an organisation, we use different ones. So you've got legitimate interests. If you're doing something which is the reason you exist and the reason you are doing something is because it's a legitimate interest, then you don't often need consent. We ask for certain things in our membership form because it's within the legitimate interest of what we do as an organisation. You've got contractual and legal obligations. If you've got a member, well, you've got an obligation to your member because you've kind of got a contract in essence of going, you're a member, you're joining our club. Well, we're going to ensure we can put you on a team. We're going to give you playing opportunities. We're going to give you training opportunities. That's kind of about contracting that way. So if someone's a member of your club, they would probably be expected to know when training is, what matches are available, what time they need to turn up and what kit do they need. Well, that's part of that contract. It's a bit of give and take, if you will. So you've got them options. Again, it's a bit of a tricky thing to sometimes get your hand around, and I will happily help clubs with that to see which ones work best, because different ones will have different ways that work in. The next 2 I'm going to tie together because it's a bit easier to explain. Purpose limitation, which is you should only collect data for a specific and legitimate purpose. If you're telling someone you need their email address, their number, their name, their parent contact information if they're a junior, you're going to say, we need that because of this reason. So to keep them informed, to make sure you've got an emergency contact, if you've got any medical issues that we need to be aware of as a club to safeguard them, that's the limitation. What you then shouldn't do is go, but can we also have X, Y, and Z because we might need that in the future, but we don't really know why. And data minimization kind of links to the point. Only data that is necessary in relation to the requirement should be collected and processed. So they're one of the same in effect. So that's a real question of what are you collecting and why? Do you look at your membership form and go, yeah, we use this because of this? We get your medical information because as a club, we should know that. So we can pass it on to team manager if you're at a game and we know why. New situations arise, you need to inform individuals if you're collecting information. My example for this, and one that really came to mind quite quickly for me, was if you were planning a tour. If you're going to say you've got a junior team, you were going to go on a tour. Well, you probably need the passport information. And you might also get different medical information that you didn't have before about dietary, sleeping arrangements, that they might have something which in a normal, we just turn up on a Saturday and like play a match on a Wednesday night and train, you wouldn't need. So you need new information. So all you need to do in that instance is you need to tell people that you're collecting this extra bit of information and why. And it's quite self-explanatory in that example of going, we're going on tour, these situations might arise, we need a bit more information. Number 4, accuracy. Personal data should be accurate and where necessary kept up to date. Again, in a sense of everyone's got email addresses, everyone's got phone numbers. We might change them every now and then. I know I'm someone who keeps the same phone number forever, you try, but it's not always as simple as that. People might have work numbers and they change. So that point is just, if someone tells you at your club, oh, I've changed my email address, I've changed my number, you just need to make sure you update that on whatever contact sheet you use, whatever system you put them numbers in. Just so then you're not sending emails or sending messages to the wrong information. So I've just put who is doing this and how are they doing this. So that's an example. If I'm a member at your club, I send a message to my team manager going, changing my number from next week. What's the process of making sure everyone in the club's informed of that? Again, I've linked 2 together. They kind of go hand in hand again. Storage limitation, accurate record keeping. I'm going to talk about retention in a specific area in a few slides, so I'll just kind of keep that as limitation. How long are you keeping things? Do you have a mechanism for deleting them when you've expired your need? Integrity, confidentiality. Appropriate security measures should be put in place to protect against unlawful and unauthorised processing, against loss, destruction or damage. So what's your mechanism? Are you getting everything on paper and then putting it in a filing cabinet? If that's your mechanism, that's fine. As long as people know that and you're confident it's secure. Is the filing cabinet locked? Who has keys to it? So obviously, a lot of clubs might use technology-based things. So again, what technology are you using? Who can access it? Is it on someone's home PC where their kid is then... I'm just going to admit someone. Is it then on a home PC, on someone's hard drive, and their kids at home school, and they can just go and look in all the files and find out some medical information about someone? Them kind of considerations, how are you protecting it? And that's that statement. Would club members or whoever members of your club who you're responsible for their data feel confident that you're protecting it to the best of your ability? Privacy notices. Again, I'm sure something we've all stumbled across. Every time we tick to go terms and conditions, embedded in there will be our privacy notice, or on a website, it's our privacy notice. So within a privacy notice, again, in the legislation, it does outline minimum things that you should be telling everyone. And by no means does a club need a 50-page privacy notices. They're just some really key bullet points that you could just fill in sections of. Identity of controller and categories of processes the club uses. A couple of terms in there I'll just define. So controller is who is obtaining the data and deciding what data you need. So if we look at our relationship with some of the clubs, and I know some people in here have access to the membership system. In that sense, England Lacrosse are the controller. We've collected the data and we've determined what bits of data we've collected. The processor is then you as the clubs, who we then go, yes, you can have access to this group of data. You process it, you use it, and obviously as clubs, those of you who are involved in the online membership will then know you've always got sent something that says, this is how you should use it. So in your club, it's again the same. Who's the controller? Is it the lacrosse club? Is it the multi-sports club? Is it the university? And the processors would be, is it the club committee? That kind of thing. What data will be collected? Names, email addresses, medical information. Just bullet point what data you are collecting. How the club intends to use the data. Is it for safety purposes, so you know if there's any medical issues? Probably yes, tick that box. It's just so you know who your members are. It's quite self-explanatory in that sense. What are you going to do with their data? You're going to use it to run your club and the club operational functions within that. The legal basis, which is what we talked about on the previous slide about the lawfulness. So are you collecting using consent? Are you using legitimate interests? And again, that's probably just a one sentence bullet underneath the header of our lawful means of processing. Who the data will be shared with. So this is really interesting and kind of links back to a point I made on an earlier slide about look at your club functions. Who's having that data? I've got examples which I can think might apply to some clubs, such as the club committee, the team captains or team managers would get that data to their specific group of people who need it. But that might not always be the case. You might have different people who need it. A safeguarding officer might have all the junior things. You might have junior section, senior section with their own little committees. The security arrangements, again, links back to earlier point, and you'll see a lot of these go hand in hand with what's in your privacy notices based on the legal principles. So what are you doing to protect their data? Where are you storing it? And what mechanisms are in place for that? The club's retention periods, how long are you keeping it for and how are you destroying it? Individuals' rights. So again, I'm not sure how familiar people are with these, but the phrases that have been kind of thrown out since GDPR came in, as it's something that was newly introduced in that piece of legislation. As an individual now, you have a lot more rights to your personal data than maybe you did before 2018. So right to be informed, right to access, right to rectification, and right to be forgotten. So you kind of need to put that in your privacy statement, that you acknowledge that people have these rights and how do they go about them. So in England Lacrosse's case, right to be informed of anything people have. So if someone email me and can you confirm you have this information about me? Yes, I can confirm we have that. Right to access. One of you could email me and go, dear Kerry, I'm submitting an access request. I have then a certain period of time, I have to tell you everything we have on you on record in England Lacrosse's documents. That's now your right to know what someone holds about you. And that could be anywhere. That could be your sports club. That could be Amazon. It could be anywhere you shop. You can go, please, can you give me a copy of everything you have about me on your system? And right to be forgotten, often a misused one because there's some rights that you don't have to be forgotten, i.e. you can't go to the doctors and go delete all my medical records. Not quite that simple, but if you've linked with a club and you go, I'm leaving your club, please forget me off your records. If, say you were going to keep it for another 2 years within your retention, but they asked to be forgotten, unless you have an exemption why they shouldn't be, you have to delete their information. and information about the right to complain to supervisory authorities, which is the Information Commissioner's Office here in the UK. So in that sense, you'll see it on ours if you ever look. It's just a statement of going, if you are unhappy with how data has been handled by X, you can complain here. And it is just literally a statement of kind of showing them if they're not happy with you as a club or as an organisation, they can go beyond you and kind of go to the big dogs, if that makes sense. So I've just added that note of important to be aware of control the process of role and obligations of data. So I use the example of the England Lacrosse membership data, where the controller, clubs are the processor. It might be that a university is the controller because they've said, we collect all the data and give you your club-specific information. If you can kind of understand those roles, it'll just help you write this privacy notice. Retention. So I quickly flagged through it before because I knew I had a bit of a section here. So this is quite important, and I think even as something like personally and everything, I think we fall into habits of just going, oh, I've got that stored somewhere, I've got a document. I know when I took up a role in my badminton club, someone handed me a book of like the last 15 years worth of members' information because they just kept it. And I think it's just a habit that people have of we keep things because we don't like to lose something if we happen to need it again. But when we've got personal data, and again, under all these new legislative rights that people have, you should outline how long you're going to keep that data for. You shouldn't really keep any data indefinitely as a lacrosse club. I can't think of a reason why you'd need to. So you just need to outline how long you're going to keep that data for and introduce processes for deleting it. So as a club, you could do it at the start of the end of a season. You go, right, we're going to delete anything from over 3 seasons ago. We don't need it. And we've got our members who are coming back. We know them. We can just kind of get rid of that spreadsheet if that's how you store it. Or if you've got paper copies, you can shred those from people who haven't returned in the last 3 years. What I would say is the next point, which I'm trying to make. If you want to keep historic records, that's fine. So a club could tell me that in 2010, they had 100 members, 40 were junior girls, 20 were junior boys, the rest were seniors. That is fine. That isn't personal information. That's anonymised data. You can still have a record knowing what your club health was, if that's the phrase to use 10 years ago. You just don't need to know that of them 100 people, you had Joe Bloggs, you had Abby, and you had me, like that kind of thing. Okay, Brexit, I've just put it in as I thought it was important to mention, although it can be quite a difficult topic to kind of look at. At the minute, the only thing that has changed with Brexit is when I mentioned GDPR being an EU legislative piece. Obviously, we're now no longer in the EU. We're not bound by that legislation. But the UK adopted the legislation. So we now have what is the UK GDPR. So it's the exact same piece of legislation. It just has a slightly different title and has obviously got a new date on it from when it became UK legislation. There may be something that comes later, which I've put in there about the potential Brexit impact, which is in respect of when we transfer information, there are specific circumstances which we can't. So when we're in the EU, we basically have free reign to send information to anyone in the EU. However, that could change. So if I wanted to send something to America, I have to go through a process of making sure there's certain things that are satisfied. And if this period, like what the government are obviously looking at in the European Commission, it might be that we'd have to meet certain criteria to send things within the EU. Obviously, that's probably just looking at, again, if you're going on tour and you need to send information to a country going, this is going to be our team sheet. In most instances, it would probably be fine, but you might just have to tick a box of going, I can confirm, I checked this, I made sure that certain securities were satisfied. So it could just be a case of you're going on tour to France, there's a lacrosse team, you're just going to go, please can you confirm that after the tournament is over, you will delete our team sheet. That's you satisfying knowing that you're still protecting your members' data even though you've transferred it. So we don't know when that outcome will come. I'll try and keep everyone updated. I might do another mail out. I know I did it a couple of years ago for clubs, and it could just be on like the club information at the start of a season if something changes on that. An action that you could do, and this is probably only really applicable to clubs that have toured a lot or maybe send teams and have exchange programs, is look within the club's records and create what I call a legacy log or a legacy data. And just in simple terms, I'd put on a spreadsheet going, in May 2019, we received a team sheet from the US full of names for their players. And it's just making sure you can have a list of what came from outside the UK. If you've got any data that came from outside the UK, you might not do. So I'll try and end each section in notes with a few key tips of just quick things that we can change maybe and make things better. And as I said at the beginning, there's no one size fits all solution. You might have policies that are dictated to you because of how you operate as an institution, as a club, as part of a multi-sports club. Pardon me. But we just need to make sure that we're fulfilling our legal obligations. And if you're taking on a role within a club, you should really understand what they are. So my key tips here, create a number of key logs. And when I use logs, it can literally be a spreadsheet, a file, a folder, just anything that kind of records things in a systematic way. So your logs include date of amendment. So if you're getting them requests to change an email address, to change a contact number, just put it on a spreadsheet. So on the 14th of February 2021, Kerry Lawler contacted me and said she needs to change her email address. We changed her email address. It's a simple action, just so you know what you've changed. Okay. Transfer logs kind of linked to that legacy log. What are you sending outside of your club? So if you've got a member who submits that access and goes, where's my data? What have you done with it? You can then say, well, we know on the 9th of September, we submitted a team sheet to the Northwest Lacrosse Association because they wanted to check your membership. So you can validate that you sent their information elsewhere, but you know exactly when you did it and why you did it. And obviously, legacy logs I've already discussed. Look at those club functions and process and assess the impact. So again, put yourself in the position of, if this was my data, would I be happy with what's happening to it? This one, again, I'm not saying there's a definitive right or wrong of how to do it. It's just a point and a preference that a central club email would be preferable to personal email if you're doing club business. So you could, as we have at England Lacrosse as our extension, you could have it at your lacrosse club extension, or you could do, it might be cheaper, just do Gmail or Outlook, just do Whitworth Lacrosse Club at outlook.com. The only reason behind this recommendation is if I use my personal email address and I walked away from your club one day, but I've been on the committee and I've got all this information, well, guess what? All that information's going with me. It's not on a club email that someone else on the committee can access. It's on my personal email. Although there are legal ways you could get it, it's not easy. It's not something you're automatically entitled to just because I was acting on behalf of your club. So it's just a consideration for those clubs, those universities who might operate on a personal email of going, let's make it all in one place. The people who need it can access one email, but at least it's in a central place and it's being monitored. And I also think, and this might come up in later presentations about digital presence, if you're inviting new people to your club or you're communicating with new people, it looks maybe a bit better if they're getting an email from the lacrosse club they're communicating with, rather than just a random email who at the time they don't associate with that club. It's just someone emailing them. And as I've referenced, take that time to train, understand policies if given the position. And I'm always here to offer guidance and help. I know that I've had some very specific training, which is by a law firm called Wright Hassel. There's a link at the end just because they've got some useful information. And obviously I've had that training, which is very sport specific to how GDPR and data protection links to sports organisations and sports clubs, which isn't readily available. There is information on the Information and Commissioner's Office, but it is very generic. And maybe if you're a bit unfamiliar with applying legislation, it can be quite convoluted sometimes. It's just easier to find them. And there's other sources. You can search GDPR for sports clubs and you might pick up bits of information. At the end of the slideshow, there is a few links and you might follow some of them and just pick up some bits of information. Okay, that's the end of that little section. So I don't know if I need to just quickly clarify anything that maybe I wasn't perfectly clear on.
Just one point, Kerry.
Yeah.
I think we've got some issues in regards to people being able to see the chat section, so we're aware of that. But okay. So what we might do is if someone does put their hand up at this point, or if they want to unmute themselves, please do so. So it's just Rebecca, Kerry. That's
fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Kerry. It's Rebecca from Cheltenham Lacrosse Club. I had a quick question, actually. This came up a couple of months ago about having a central email account. obviously, if you've got a role such as like the welfare role or something, and you create, obviously that's better to sort of be a central account. But then when you transfer the position across to somebody else, what are you supposed to do with the data that's in the email, like the historic? Because obviously, if someone's emailing into the welfare representative to say, I've got a problem with X, Y, and Z in the club, and then you change that position, obviously that data stays centrally because it's in the central email account, but are you supposed to delete that? Because obviously that's then a privacy kind of issue.
Yeah, I think there's probably an overlap, which I'm going to admit I'm not 100% confident, because that's probably a safeguarding overlap with data protection. And I imagine if someone's emailing the club, obviously they're emailing the club, but I also get that actually the person that might take over the role might have been someone who the complaint or something might have been against, and that's obviously 100% a potential issue that might arise. What I would do with that, Abby, can you just take a quick note of that? And I will speak to our safeguarding leagues. I think that's probably something we should work together on a piece of advice about, because I think it could be a scenario that arises, and I think you're perfectly well reason to ask it, because it is something that we should consider. So I'll follow that up with our safeguarding lead, and we'll try and work on something what we think might be best practice.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
No.
And Rebecca, Data, we have your email address, so I'll let Kerry pick that up with you directly as well.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, hopefully I've done the really hard, heavy hitting stuff of legislation. So now I'm just going to move on to some other little bits. And then hopefully, like I said at the beginning, just to try and help you as a club, maybe things that you haven't thought of, or you've inherited systems that you've just kept, or is actually might be time to make some change. So when I use the term data management, it essentially means any activity, whether it's implementation of systems, admin, how you acquire data, how you store data, how you retrieve it, how you share it. That generic term is data management. It's traditionally used for digital mechanisms, but it's equally applicable to any paper-based systems. It's just a term for how would you deal with data, in effect. And what I will say for this is if you look at the idea of left brain, right brain, creative, logical, I am so far to the left brain, it's untrue. So some of this is very I think in a very logical way, and I'm very easy to say not everyone thinks like that, and that's perfectly okay. There's just a few little things that I think might be good for clubs. Okay, there is a lot of technology available, and I think especially over the last 12 months while we've been in this pandemic, technology has skyrocketed. There's so many solutions that have come out to kind of support people working from home and homeschooling that might actually be beneficial for clubs. So when I speak about good data management, what we want to achieve within a club, within a university, within a school by good data management is an improved awareness of and understanding of what data is held. So do you know what you have? If someone asked you, do you have this about me? Can you say yes or no? Can you easily find it? Obviously improved access. If it's in a filing cabinet at the club, which you live 10 miles away and someone needs to change something, well, if it's on your computer, you can go and change it, but otherwise you'd have to right, next time I go to the club and I have to drive and I have to go in a storage cupboard to change something. It's them kind of little decisions of if something's digital, is it better? I'm not saying 100% of the time digital is better than paper. I'm going to come on in a minute to a scenario where paper does work. And then more timely and better quality information. Obviously, you update a spreadsheet, you update a document, you've got version histories, all those little things, which mean you've got better quality information, you've got updated tracking documents of things, rather than having to go, right, oh, such a body's got that information, and maybe I need to send an email to him to change it. Just little considerations like that. Just scroll along to the next one. So, a few considerations from a club point of view. And I'm thinking the way I addressed this topic was thinking, right, if I was a volunteer, which I am in some of my badminton clubs that I play at, what would make my life more efficient? And I'm fully aware of some of the people on this call have a million different roles in their volunteer capacity. And what we're trying to do is make them bits easier for you, make them more efficient. So transfer away from paper where you can. What is it necessary to have in physical form? And what's the process for destroying it? So an example that I discussed with some colleagues the other day was when we do camps, I print all the camper information off in paper, because that way, if someone needs to go to hospital, it's so much easier to rip a piece of paper out of a file and go to hospital with it than try and search on your phone for a spreadsheet and find someone's thing. For that instance, paper, hands down, I think is a better solution. And then we shred it at the end of camp. We've got paper, but we've got a system to get rid of it. So as a club, if you use paper, right, what do you use paper for? And why are you using paper? And what can we do? I know a number of clubs do their membership registration day fill in paper and transfer it to an online form? Is there a way you can just put it online straight away, get the person to fill in an online document? You've got Google Docs, things like that, because you're increasing the chance of human error if you're transferring from paper, reading handwriting, you're obviously mistyping something, all those little nitty-gritty things that might happen. Security of digital documents. So again, it's looking at, right, you've got digital documents. Are they in a password protected folder? Are they on a hard drive separately from your home desktop? I used the example quite early on in the presentation. If you've got a computer that someone's now using for homeschooling, can they access all these people's personal information? All right, I'm not saying anyone's children's going to go on and do anything bad with them, but is it the safest mechanism? Obviously, you can password protect documents. Obviously, I use Office quite a bit. Obviously, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, you can password protect them. So that means when you open it, you need to put a password in. And if you're sharing things, that's quite a useful thing to do. But I would always advise the process that's advised, like within the ICO and data protection. So I'm going to send Abby at work a document. So I'm going to email her the document, but it's got loads of private information on. It's password protected. I'll then text her the password rather than emailing a password and emailing the document. Because otherwise, if her emails get hacked or anything unusual like that, well, they've got the password and the document anyway. So there's little things like that. If you are going to send mass files of personal information, or if you use Rebecca's, if the safeguarding matters and you really want to be very careful about what you're sending and sharing, password protecting documents is a really useful thing to do. Recovery plans. So I've used this statement, and it's obviously, I've said, what happens if your computer breaks, you use USB. And what I'm trying to do there is suggest, what about cloud solutions? Obviously, if we have iCloud, we have Microsoft Office, you have Google Drive. There's a number of different solutions. And obviously, I've only named 3 there, but I'm sure people who work in different businesses are aware of many others. That solution might work better because you're not then relying on a piece of technology which you can lose, you can break, you might spill a drink over, all those little things that might happen. So obviously, online cloud solutions, they might be a solution, might not be. I know there's expenses involved, which might not work for everyone. But as I said at the beginning, there's just a few little ideas that you might consider, and you might make little steps to change if you think we could be doing more. So online document storage, a benefit of cloud storage. I don't need to send 4 people one file to all look at. I can share it with them. So rather than having 4 versions of a document and 4 lots of personal data on different computers and different devices, well, there's still only one copy. Just everyone can access it like they need to access it. So again, there's those kind of benefits. It's avoiding duplicated copies of data. Data acquisition. Always stumble trying to say that. The necessity, duplication, and source of data. So think about what you're downloading. Apologies, I'm just going to take a quick drink. So again, I'm going to use the example of the England Lacrosse membership data. Some of you might go on Sport 80, download the information of all your club players. I do it once a month for England Lacrosse to kind of do it right. How many members have we got? A bit of an update. But then I delete it after I finished with it, because otherwise I'd end up in my downloads with the same personal data of obviously all the members, a copy from September, a copy from October, a copy from November, a copy from December. And I think people do kind of fall into a habit of just having the downloads and not deleting them. So there's just duplicated copies of the same information, and sometimes quite large files. So again, just a consideration in your actions of, right, if I've downloaded something, I've deleted it. Somebody's got a copy of that document. Do I also need a copy now I've sent it on, or can I delete it? Little things like that. I would say, again, I have no idea what people do for jobs, etc. The businesses you're involved in, you might be aware of different solutions, but just be cautious when you're looking at systems, because if they're traditional like work-based systems, they might not be the best for showing emails, displaying emails, etc. I know an example, Microsoft Teams, if you invite everyone to a meeting, everyone's email is visible. And obviously, I'm sure we've all come across that everyone would be rather blind copied into an email than just copied into an email. We can all see everyone's email addresses. Not ideal. So it's just little things like that. You'll soon discover we're using different systems and investigate what options might work for you, your club, etc. Again, a few little key tips. Some of them are repeating things that I've said before, just to emphasise those points for everyone. Where possible, share files so multiple people can view. If you do need to send them, use them precautions such as the password protection I talked about. Create file storage solutions. And again, this is very much linked to my left brain of everything is in folders of subjects, dates by years, topics of things I work on. Every file is dated. It's very OCD, I'll give it that. But what it does do is when you come to delete things and find things, everything's in an order that you can go, that file's from 2017, we don't need it anymore, it's too old. That's 2018, we'll leave it to the end of this season. By documenting things like that, it just makes it easier when you come to those processes to find things, to delete things. Look for those download duplications and assess how we can delete them. Just introduce key steps to yourself going, right, once a week I'm going to go through my downloads and just make sure I delete anything I don't need. Little steps like that could help you, and it's just protecting people's data, as I said at the very beginning of the presentation, and also probably saving you some storage on your computers. Regular backups. And a prime example, obviously, the one that popped up on my phone this morning was WhatsApp. It's like, back up your chats. And I know my WhatsApp chat is probably nowhere near the level of data that people have, obviously, on computers. But it's that concept of, if the backup's there, make sure you do it. And just put it, and it just means if something happens, something corrupts, etc., and all this technology stuff that's meant to be amazing goes wrong, you know you've got a backup there to access and you're not starting from fresh. Ensure the latest software and development updates are installed. Again, I know pretty much probably we all get annoyed in the middle of the day, we're doing something, it's like, download the latest version of this, update your software, and you're like, I'll do it later. Obviously, them software and development updates, probably, very rarely there's some mass change. A lot of them are just little security fixes because they've been highlighted to an error that someone might be able to get into your system in a mass scale. So take the time to download them, just make sure you action them, you're not sat on hundreds of downloads to do software updates. Okay, end of that little section. If anyone has any points, or otherwise I'll just move on to our next and final one. I'm aware of time, but hopefully I'll try and get through it and you're not going to stay here for too long.
Carrie, go ahead. Carrie, keep going. We're doing well.
Okay, the next one is cybersecurity. And although this might not be exactly relatable to your club role, your uni role, etc., it's something personal that I think, obviously, I'm aware of it. I like this kind of world of data and stuff. I've got a bit of information which I think is just useful to share because I don't think everyone's fully aware of the scale of what can happen. So really key thing, phishing. And the term phishing is that generic term used for when someone's trying to scam you, whether they're sending you a bogus text, a bogus email, pretending to be someone else. That's the phishing. And that's how people are trying to source your data and get into your files, your systems, your online accounts, anything like that. Okay, it's becoming more difficult, and without calling the people behind it clever, they're getting very clever and intelligent about how they do these sorts of things. And I know recently there's been loads of press, I've seen it all over Facebook about obviously how unfortunately vulnerable people are being targeted with the COVID scams. That's someone phishing, and they're doing a horrible job, but they're getting better at it and they're getting success out of it. So I'm just going to try and go through this to kind of educate you, flag some things you might not be aware of, just so it prevents any unfortunate thing happening in the future. Okay, so what I've said in this statement at the top, if you read it, is the expanding their source of obtaining trait-like data. So if you've got suspicions, that's it. So when I use trait-like data, what I mean is no longer are we getting emails pretending to be a foreign prince saying they've got loads of money that they want to leave you. They're very rare, even though that's the kind of traditional, oh yeah, it's a foreign prince who said they want a load of data. That's not happening anymore. They're getting better at how they can source things. So they'll go on your LinkedIn, they'll find out you work for an organization or involvement, go on your LinkedIn, go on your social media, and they'll find things. They'll write emails with a bit more tone and emotion. So that robotic, oh, it's obviously a scam email, isn't always as easy to spot anymore. So the example I gave and I will give is, so I'm very into rugby league. So, and obviously it's Sport Leeds Rhinos. Someone who went on my Twitter would know that. Everything I retweet is probably based on rugby league or football. So they'd go on my Twitter, go, right, we know Kerry works for England Lacrosse. We know she likes rugby league. What we'll do is we'll buy an email that looks very similar to Kerry's. So obviously, as everyone will know, is at englandlacrosse.co.uk. They might buy one, but slightly change the spelling, but ever so slightly that if you were just climbing past it, you won't even notice. They might send an email to someone else in the organisation and go, pretend to be me going, oh, I can't believe the rugby last night because they've seen that I like rugby. They've put a bit of tone like it would be something I'd say. Send it to someone, ask them to buy something, ask them to submit money somewhere, etc. And that person thinking, oh, yes, Kerry, she talked about rugby league earlier. She well got it about last night. Would then go, yeah, okay, done it. And before you know it, that's how you get scammed and how you get fished into things that aren't obviously what we want to do. So if anything looks a bit suspicious, or if anything you kind of like, right, I'm just going to double check it. Obviously, if you take 2 minutes to look at every single email you've got and every single text, it's better to be safe than sorry of going, I'm in a rush, just respond, do what I need to do. I know we all get caught up in our work lives and etc. of just kind of doing things like this. So take 2 minutes to look at emails, look at the detail, make sure they are the one. Obviously, if you click reply, sometimes it can appear all. So if you said mine, it would just say K Law, but if you click reply, it would reveal the full email, and that's where you might spot something isn't quite right. Obviously, it's very cheap to buy email extensions on like an individual basis, so people are getting hold of them. They're also buying, we used to have this, if you've got a padlock on your browser, if everyone knows what it is, if you've got like Amazon, it would have a padlock for the HTTPS, which means it's secure. It's getting cheaper to buy them. People are investing more money because they think they're going to get better rewards, so they're spending that little extra time making it look more authentic. If you're unsure, don't click links or details in messages, visit the site. If you get an email from Amazon, I'll use that example throughout, get an email from Amazon and you're like, oh, right, rather than clicking the email, just go to Google and go to Amazon directly through your browser. At least you know you're getting there. Use the contact details. So if you've got a number, it says, we need us to ring you to validate something. Go on the website of the company of the organisation, make sure them numbers match. If they don't, ring the one on the website, and if they say, oh, it is us, at least you've checked and you've protected yourself. Log into your account directly and see if the request is there. So again, go to Amazon, look, right, there's no request, obviously that's bogus, okay. So again, if you do get anything bogus, you get a scam, you get a phishing email, this is what you can do with it. And I'm not sure how many people are aware of it. I think we just have this habit of deleting and ignoring it. Whereas you can actually send them to a designated government email address, and it just means they'll investigate it, they'll try and shut down whatever these people are doing, and you'll protect more people in the long run. So just as a bit of an insight for how this happens so easily, and I think we all kind of have the, oh, have you fallen for that? What happens, so if I use Amazon, what a scammer would do, they'd send you that email, they would then skin Amazon's login page, so they'd basically copy it, they'd copy all the graphics, all the background, put the login box, obviously you type in your email and your password, click login. The scammers and the phishers would take the email and password you've just give, store it into their siphon database, redirect you to Amazon's real login page, which should look the exact same. So you've just gone, oh, maybe I've typed in my password wrong, log in, and then you're in your actual Amazon. But it's so quick, you don't even realise sometimes. So it's just them little matters of actions you can do. If you think you've been the victim of fraud, cybersecurity, anything like that, if it's something to do with your bank and finances, contact your bank straight away without a given. They'll obviously look at how they can stop any further transactions. They'll see if they can get the money back, which some cases it can, some cases it can't. Just depends on the extent and obviously how far down the line you are. And if you do think that obviously you've got action frauds numbers there, etc., I won't bother reading them out. You'll get the presentation later and you can take them down if you want. So, sorry. Quick tips. So my thing on this is little actions to good practice can have a better reward. Much rather spend 20 minutes doing something different, like once a week or a few times a day, than have all my bank and all my money stolen type thing. I know it's a bit of a large scale problem, but it can happen and people have unfortunately been victim to it. So separate password for your email accounts. And some people kind of look and go, why, it's my password. But if I've got a password for my Amazon, my eBay, my ASOS, whatever I shop, all right, they've got a password, that's fine. That's one thing they've got into. And obviously, unless your card detail they can get into, they're not really going to do much damage. Whereas if they get your email password, they're into everything. They know what sites you use. They can see what emails you get in. They know what contacts to use. So if you protect your email to a different extent and password protect your email differently to all your other generic uses, excuse the phrase, it's just that bit of extra security. Okay, two-factor authentication. For those who don't know what that term is or aren't familiar with it, that's when a website will go, all right, log in with your email password. We will then text you another code. A lot of banks use two-factor authentication because obviously it's something that you want to be extra vigilant, extra safe. So you might get a text with a different code that you have to put in. Some banks have the extra little keypad. So that's two-factor authentication, where you would get an email, so you put in your password, and then they also send you a text because it's highly unlikely someone's going to get your phone and your email access. So that is readily available. It might take you 20 seconds to wait for a text, but I'd rather take that 20 seconds than have a negative impact down the line. Okay, update devices and apps. I know I said a similar thing about software and devices. It is one of the things, I know I've got updates I need to on my phone that have come this morning, and I know it's that annoying thing of, well, I want to go on my phone, I want to use it, But a lot of them updates, probably 1 in 20 might change the appearance. You might get a new Facebook and it looks differently. All the other updates that you get on a weekly basis are them security fixes. They're just fixing little bugs, and actually they're protecting you. So take the time, do it. Don't fall into the, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll do it later. The 2 images that I've put on there, they're useful guides that are free for anyone to access. So that is on the National Cybersecurity Centre. The link's on the next slide, which you'll see. So you've got cyber threat sports organisations, just something to educate yourself on. I know we're in lockdown again, you might want to have a bit of a read. It's just there for you to have a look at. And the same, there's some training for staff available. Obviously, staff volunteers, it's just something you might personally want to educate yourself a bit more with. Like I said, it's not directly applicable to, you're a volunteer, you're in a sports club, but it's just good practice to have an awareness about things that are happening every day, and it's so common, especially when we're very technology based. So then last slide that I've got for you is just bits of further reading. So Sport and Recreation Alliance, obviously they're quite a prominent organisation. People who've been around, and I obviously communicated with 3 years ago when GDPR was just around. Sports Recreation Alliance, they've got loads of templates, they've got bits of information that if you wanted to start fresh with a privacy statement, they've got a template document that will help you go along the way, and other little documents. Right Hassle, as I mentioned there, where I did my training, they've got some specific GDPR for sports clubs, so very applicable knowledge, scenario based, which is applicable to you rather than the generic, this is just GDPR legislation, a bit confusing. National Cybersecurity Centre, we've just talked about them. Then the 3 underneath are just things that I find interesting, bits of articles that have been about data protection, about applications of sports sector. Obviously, you'll see the We Live Security one, sports data ransom. A lot of the data protection breaches and things we've probably heard about are big companies, banks, airlines who've been obviously scammed and trying to get people to pay a ransom money. This is an application of one for sport. There's not many available. It's just a bit of an interesting read. And obviously, it's just GDPR for sports sector. But yeah, hopefully that was all right. I know I've gone a few minutes over, and like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions about generic stuff. If you want to talk specific and want me to look at privacy notices, just talk you through things, do a bit of training to your club on cybersecurity. I'm happy to do those things as part of, like, obviously work. It's not a problem whatsoever. So just get in touch and arrange that if that's something that you wanted. Obviously, just going to finish on that last slide, which is our next one, just obviously showing if you want to sign up, the other ones are online. But yeah, happy to take any questions if anyone wants to ask anything or just ponder on all that fun information.
If anyone does want to unmute themselves and ask some questions, please do so. Or if you are able to access the chat, just pop anything in there. A lot of information to take in, but good information. So thanks.
If you suddenly come round in the morning and think, oh, I've got a question, my email inbox is always open. So yeah.
We'll leave it a few minutes just to see if anyone does come through.
Yeah.
So this is the awkward bit where. Oh yeah.
Thanks, Alison. Just unmute yourself.
There we go, unmuted. Just a quick question. I've always been under the sort of maybe misapprehension that medical forms that we use, get the information that we gather, has to have like a proper signature as opposed to electronic signature. Is that not the case anymore? Because I know we do a lot of these forms online, and I know that our sports club, not the lacrosse section, but our sports club gather electronic information as opposed to, you know, paper these days. So, but I've always, you know, sort of preferred well, I've always been in the belief that it has to be a proper sort of handwritten signature as opposed to a electronic one. Is that not the case now?
I think that might have been all like the previous legislation. What happened with GDPR is there is what is called special category information. So when I talked about lawfulness very early on in the presentation, when you collect special category, so anything about medical information, disability, gender orientation, special categories like that, you need to validate to a different extent. So normally consent is better when you're using them because you do. But in terms of a physical or digital, there's nothing on that. The only thing is about if someone is under 13 needing it to be their parent. That's the age at which it splits from the parent being able to give the child being able to give it and the parent giving it you. But yeah.
So a child over 13 can give you that information?
Yeah, so the legislation said once a child hits 13, that data is theirs. It's no longer the onus of their parents. Obviously, not saying that's what you need to do as a club. You can still say we want a parent to do it, but it's just the legislative point of where a child has right to their own data is 13.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's thank you.
No problem.
Well, we've hit the hour mark, so I'm gonna round it up there. Like Kerry says, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop her a line, and you can pick up a direct call with her. And Rebecca, I've taken a note of that point which you raised previously, so I'll make sure that that's followed up off the back of this webinar.
That's great. Thanks, Abby.
No problem. Right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Was probably a tough one to start this little webinar series on, but hopefully you've taken something from it and it'll be useful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. That was great.
Cheers.